Okay, so this whole nature, God is a part of nature proposition doesn't aid the theistic argument. Um, just to start off, I don't think there is a theistic argument to begin with. Um, Most of them are simply, I guess all of them I see that they just amount to fallacious reasoning or the ignoring of certain inconvenient ideas that would counter their validity. Um, I don't think when you're dealing with something, with the existence of a specific thing, that you should even be looking for some kind of argument, some kind of, oh, well, philosophical reason why it's the case, or why the universe is like this. When you're dealing with whether something specific exists, there's only one flat line. Is there evidence for it, or is there no evidence for it? Is it obviously there, or is it not apparently there? When you're talking about, some like something, a concrete thing like God, you can't come up with these cosmological arguments. Like, none of them work. None of them work. So anyway, about this whole God being a part of nature ordeal, this one is just self-defeating. If you're going to say that God intervenes and God interacts and makes himself appear before prophets and stuff, you're explicitly saying that he's interacting with nature. But again, like TJ said, like you said, nature is this more complex word than many Christians will give it thought for. So yeah, you kind of explained all that. Yeah, so like what I was saying, like even like in the Bible, there's, I'm just gonna say this, even in the Bible, there's not one instance where a person just through faith just said, "Oh, God exists, I have to serve him," and whatever. It was all through signs and whatever. Like, God, like, pretty much just went before every single person in their face explicitly to convince of them, or gave them a miracle, whatever, convinced them that he existed, and then they followed him. So I don't see any reason now for people to say, oh well, God doesn't have any interaction with the world today. Maybe he had some then, but whatever. We're gonna instantly believe him unconditionally, because that doesn't work. I mean, even the Bible doesn't even give any example of having blind faith in someone who says to have God. I mean, you have to. I mean, if you're going to be a Christian, you're going to have to say, okay, well, I'm going to practice this, and then I'll see if what it says comes to pass, because it has a bunch of examples of what'll happen in your life and whatever, which I don't think are vague enough to, if you're analytical enough, or vague enough to be able to apply to anybody. So yeah, I mean, it's testable. Like, I don't agree that that these things are untestable. I think you can actually go down and say, okay, well, is this real or is this not? Does this work or does it not? Anyway, as for God not being a part of nature, you can easily have an instance where that kind of works. But yeah, again, this whole, he needs to explicitly, interact with the world for any of this to make sense. You can have a person making an artificial, you can have an artificial world analogy like the Matrix or whatever, where you have a world that's on a computer interface or a virtual interface, essentially a world that's not present at all. So it's being omnipresent is something just completely unnecessary. Because when I'm looking at, let's say, a video game world on my computer, let's say I'm the designer, I have all these tools, I can pretty much be knowledgeable of anything that's going on, like at my fingertips. So there's no need for me to be omnipresent. I don't even know where the omnipresent argument came from. Whatever, it's probably part of another one of those cosmological arguments. It's not biblical anyway. So I mean, that works. course, it's just another, I think the only arguments that can be made are to say what kind of reasonings could make sense or are possible if you were to say that God existed, but you can't have an argument by itself that says that God exists. It has to be anecdotal. It has to be through experience. It has to be what's the word? It has to be empirical. So here's a really long text comment that I wrote, and that's why I'm making this video, because I write way too long text comments. So it is true that apart from personal experience, there is no way, as things are, of confirming the validity of a religion. With that said, I have to say that if not all, most people will jump the gun and will convert to something through some sort of sensationalism. I remember you saying that the only rational way to be a theist would be to experience God's presence personally and explicitly, and I agree. So I would like to know what you would do in an instance like that, as there would be no one to call a liar or intellectually hasty. On that note, I would assume a person should analytically determine whether they were crazy and such or not, etc. As for experiences that can be excused as coincidental, I find the blue coat counter-argument a stretch, but valid. You have to consider that if this story is true, not only would the sign have to match the criterion of wearing a blue coat, but it would also have to match the criterion of holding some great answer to a spiritual question. Of course, if you had met up with him, there would be a reaction, but he would in no way be able to say that you were what God was talking about in his vision, as you would first off discredit the vision he had as but a dream. I don't deny that you would help him see, however, through the aid of that irony, that stock shouldn't be put in spirituality so easily, etc. So aside from this small gap of a chance for him to meet a person that is both wearing a blue shirt and holds a strong opinion about religion, that is willing to preach it, we can find many more alternatives, including not only people not wearing a blue jacket, but disinterested people that would stack up to more than just 95% chance of his dream not being fulfilled. So while I would rather not chalk this story off as just something that happens all the time, coincidences do happen, albeit that this is one heck of a coincidence all the same. But it wouldn't be enough to persuade me. After all, you're right that we don't hear stories from the people who are disappointed that their dreams didn't come true. So it would be interesting to talk about after this, as you discussed on your video quite completely, about how we should deal with outside and public knowledge in terms of credibility, is where do we draw the line when it's closer to home? What would be the minimum necessary within a personal experience? This is not outside knowledge and evidence that everyone's aware of. What would be the minimum necessary within a personal experience to persuade you to be interested in what's going on, and how would you react? On a lesser note, what if someone you knew personally very well and trusted well enough told you a tall tale in the context that you should seriously believe them? Both instances are particular, I think, since dismissing the progenitor of the story as a liar doesn't work. I like how you constantly incorporated the liar card in your video, and in a lot of your videos you always take the point of, okay, well, if we're actually going to face this without accusing them of being a liar, because I think accusing someone of being a liar, obviously it's valid. I mean, people lie to persuade other people of things all the time, but it itself, unfortunately, it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out, unfortunately, that is very well reasonable, but it's a cop-out all the same. I mean, can't really dismiss something if someone's very earnest and honest. If I'm telling you something that I know is the truth, and you just dismiss me as a liar, then it's like, oh well, I guess I can't tell people things anymore because they just won't trust me. My word is worth nothing. The moment anyone disagrees with what I have to say, my word is no longer worth anything. So yeah, it's very good to actually consider things in the sense of people not always spouting BS. So that's a good approach. So yeah, but in these instances in particular, the instance where you experience something yourself, and when someone you very well know their character and trust says something to you, are particular instances that are interesting, since dismissing the progenitor of the story as a liar doesn't work. So with all the video response spam that TJ's getting, I doubt this will get a lot of his attention, or your attention if you're watching. So anyone can answer this if they want to. I think this makes a good epistemological talk.